We're less than 2 months away from the release of the highly anticipated Metroid Dread, and personally, I'm becoming more and more excited about it with each passing day. Although I expect to love the game regardless, there's certain aspects we haven't seen in the trailers so far that I strongly hope are present in the finished product. Here's 7 things I hope to see in Metroid Dread. Number 1. An explanation of how things resolved between Samus and the Galactic Federation. For those of you who don't know, Metroid Dread will be the 5th Metroid game in its 2D storyline. The 4th game was Metroid Fusion, which was released 19 years ago. At the end of Metroid Fusion, Samus realizes that her employer, the Galactic Federation, has been secretly working on breeding Metroids with the intent of harnessing their DNA capabilities. Samus disagreed with that decision and decided to go rogue against the Federation's actions. She instead activates the ship's self-destruct procedure and escapes in time for her own safety. But in Samus's rebellion, she destroyed the planet SR-388, which as a result completely eradicates the X-Parasites and all of the Metroids from existence. Or at least, that's presumed to be the case. As a result, the game ended with Samus now in serious trouble with the Galactic Federation, even though no Metroids or X-Parasites appeared to be in existence anymore. This was a significant cliffhanger, and even though it's been 19 years since, it's important that Dread addresses this cliffhanger and builds upon that narrative. Otherwise, the story and experience of Dread will be somewhat cheapened, since it wouldn't feel like a genuine continuation of the story. Number 2. A strong sense of dread. The Metroid games have always featured a quality sense of isolation and horror, and obviously, with the latest edition being called Metroid Dread, I think it's safe to say that we can expect more of the same. The Emmy robots relentlessly hunting Samus adds an extra level of suspense and anxiety, and I absolutely love that. My hope is that they lean into this sense of dread as much as possible, and make this the most unsettling Metroid game that we've ever seen. I think it's fitting, considering the fact that the core fanbase has grown up a lot in the last 19 years. So for the most part, we could certainly handle a more mature atmosphere and tone. I'm not saying I need to see some really twisted crap in Metroid Dread, but for example, I would love to see levels that really mess with the lighting. Give us some rooms that are almost completely covered by darkness, as Samus has to deal with the Emmys and various Metroids, and have Samus use unique visors to deal with the horrifying atmosphere. The best way I can describe it in short is to have certain levels feel like Resident Evil meets Metroid. It's certainly not a necessity, but I hope to see it. Number 3. An implementation of the Prime-only abilities. As I mentioned earlier, the last part of the story we experienced leading up to Metroid Dread was Metroid Fusion, which dropped 19 years ago. But since then, we've enjoyed 3 different 3D Samus adventures in the Metroid Prime series. And with that has been the introduction of unique weapons and special abilities that hadn't been seen before in the 2D Metroid games, like the Boost Ball, the Flamethrower, and the Seeker Missiles, just to name a few. It isn't mandatory, but it would be pretty cool to see some of these abilities brought into the 2D games, not only to increase Samus's arsenal, but also as a way of further connecting the 2D and 3D universes together, and as a result, adding an extra layer of continuity. Number 4. A quality soundtrack that pays homage to the older Metroid fans. This really doesn't apply to me as much, since I went through Metroid Fusion only recently. On the other hand, there are many fans who went through the game the year it was released, and have since been waiting nearly 2 decades for a new release in the series. They're the ones who lived through the initial exciting rumors of Metroid Dread on the Nintendo DS, which never came to fruition. Acknowledging these fans in the new game would be a nice gesture, and musically is a great way to do it by remixing several iconic and recognizable tracks like music from Norfair, Lower Brinstar, and Kraid's Lair. More on that one in a minute. Ultimately, out of the 7 things I'm hoping for, this one is the best bet, as nearly every Metroid game to date has had fantastic music, and if the trailers so far are any indication, then Dread certainly won't disappoint. Number 5. Kraid. I talked about this big guy in my most recent video about forgotten Nintendo characters, and I'll probably keep talking about him as he was a pivotal character in both Metroid and Super Metroid. Somehow, after being one of only 2 bosses before Mother Brain in the original, and despite his Godzilla-like appearance in Super Metroid, he's been basically non-existent in the game since. In past Metroid games, he's been described as the brutal ruler of Brinstar and as one of the leaders of the space pirate armies. With such a prominent role and with such a daunting appearance, I would love to see him make a powerful comeback in Metroid Dread and re-establish himself as a powerful villain on the same level as Ridley. Number 6. Foreshadowing of whatever enemies are ahead. Nintendo has already stated that this will be the conclusion of the Metroid saga that began in 1986. This doesn't necessarily mean that it's the end of Samus's adventures, but rather the end of the story's focus on the Metroids. If the Metroid species is no longer the prominent villain after Dread, then it would be interesting to get a glimpse of what's in store for the future. It will put a test to Nintendo's creativity, as they've relied heavily upon the Metroids and the X-Parasites up to this point. But it's a huge universe out there, and seeing a completely new opposition for Samus would provide a fresh outlook for the series. Number 7. A continuation of Samus's story. So there is speculation that if this is really the end of the Metroid story arc, then maybe it will actually be the end of Samus altogether, as the end of the game may involve her demise in some sort of heroic fashion. I don't necessarily hate this idea for Samus's story down the road, but I would hate the timing of it if this is how Metroid Dread ends. Metroidvania games have become incredibly popular, and with the Metroid franchise finally starting to gain the kind of excitement and attention it deserves, it would then be devastating to abruptly stop Samus's story right as it was reaching its apex. If anything, I was hoping that this game would be the catalyst for a more widespread level of excitement for the Metroid franchise moving forward. Killing off Samus would be the opposite of that. I guess we'll just have to wait and find out on October 8th. So now it's your turn. What are you guys hoping to see in Metroid Dread? Let me know in the comments section below. Thanks for watching as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more Nintendo content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.